You have been telling yourself that nothing is happening because your outer life still looks almost the same room, the same obligations, the same conversations repeated in slightly different forms. You wake up and move through familiar hours, yet something inside you no longer responds as it once did. What used to motivate you now feels strangely hollow. What used to frighten you has begun to lose its authority. Even the identity you worked so hard to build can feel like a coat that still fits your body but no longer belongs to you. You call this confusion. You call it exhaustion. You may even call it failure. But the deeper truth is more unsettling. Your inner world may already be preparing to transform, and the part of you that depends on continuity is trying to convince you that nothing is changing. This will not reach you because you are more enlightened than anyone else. It will reach you because some part of your personality has become unable to continue the old arrangement without betraying something essential. Carl Jung spent decades studying this exact threshold. He understood that the psyche does not always announce transformation through clarity, inspiration, or confidence. Often, it announces transformation through disturbance. Energy disappears from old ambitions. Familiar relationships become harder to inhabit. The future goes quiet. You begin to feel separated from the person you have been, but you cannot yet see the person you are becoming. That gap is where you are most likely to misunderstand yourself. You expect transformation to feel like expansion, but its first movement is often contraction. You expect a new direction, but first you lose conviction in the old one. You expect courage, but first you meet the fear that was hidden beneath your competence. The psyche does not begin by giving you a new identity. It begins by withdrawing belief from the identity that has outlived its truth. This is why the message reaches you only when your inner world is ready. Readiness does not mean that you feel prepared. It means that the unconscious has gathered enough pressure to interrupt the conscious life you have been defending. It means the conflict between who you appear to be and what you have become inwardly can no longer remain politely hidden. Something in you has reached the limit of adaptation. Jung called this movement individuation, but the word is often misunderstood. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not the construction of a more impressive personality. It is the painful process by which you become less divided against yourself. The ego, which organizes your conscious identity, must enter a relationship with the parts of the psyche it has ignored, rejected, or never learned to recognize. This includes the shadow, but it also includes unlived capacities, neglected values, buried grief, disowned anger, and forms of intelligence that could not develop inside the life you were expected to live. The first sign is often a loss of psychic energy. You can still perform, but the performance costs more. You can still smile, answer, achieve, reassure, and cooperate, yet each action feels as if it must be dragged through an invisible resistance. Jung observed that libido, by which he meant general psychic energy, does not disappear without meaning. It withdraws from forms that can no longer carry the life of the psyche. What you experience as a lack of motivation may be a redistribution of energy away from an identity that has become psychologically sterile. A person sits at the edge of the bed before work, holding a phone without opening any application. The alarm stopped minutes ago, but one hand remains motionless around the screen. In the hallway, shoes are waiting beside the door, exactly where they were placed the night before. No dramatic thought appears, only a quiet sentence, almost too faint to hear. I cannot keep living at this distance from myself. You may judge that moment as weakness, because the old identity survives by turning every refusal into a defect. But what you are calling laziness may be the psyche withdrawing cooperation from a life that requires your constant self-abandonment. The danger is not that you will change. The danger is that you will force yourself not to. When the unconscious begins to challenge a conscious attitude, the ego often responds with control. You create stricter routines. You demand more productivity. You search for explanations that will allow you to return to normal. You may fill every silence with noise, because stillness makes the conflict harder to avoid. If this pattern remains unconscious, you can spend years treating the symptoms of transformation as enemies, while the deeper life inside you becomes increasingly desperate to be acknowledged. Your inner world begins to transform when the persona can no longer contain the whole of you. The persona is the social face you learn to present in order to belong. Jung did not describe it as false in itself. You need a way to meet the world. You need roles, manners, skills, and recognizable forms. The problem begins when you mistake the role for the totality of who you are. Then every demand made by the persona becomes a commandment. You must be dependable, agreeable, strong, useful, calm, successful, rational, spiritual, or endlessly understanding. The more praised the role becomes, the more dangerous it feels to step outside it. A woman reads a message from a family member asking for help. Her chest tightens before she has finished the first line. She types, "Of course," then deletes it. She places the phone face down, walks to the kitchen, and begins wiping an already clean counter. 10 minutes later, she sends the same answer she has sent for years. No one sees the moment in which another answer almost existed. Jung understood that the persona becomes oppressive when it demands the sacrifice of the living personality. You may not hate the role you have played. It may have protected you. It may have brought love, safety, opportunity, or respect. Yet gratitude does not make a role permanent. A structure can save you at one stage of life and suffocate you at another. What you are calling selfishness may be the first honest boundary formed by a self that has spent years surviving through availability. Transformation also begins when your shadow stops accepting exile. The shadow is not merely everything cruel, shameful, or destructive in you. Jung used the term for the qualities your conscious identity could not include. If you built your life around being kind, your shadow may carry anger. If you built it around competence, your shadow may carry helplessness. If you built it around independence, your shadow may carry the need to be cared for. If you became spiritual by rising above conflict, your shadow may hold a precise and earthly refusal that no affirmation can dissolve. A man listens while a colleague takes credit for an idea he developed. He smiles, nods, and says that the outcome matters more than recognition. Later, alone in the car, he grips the steering wheel until his fingers ache. He tells himself that anger is beneath him. At home, he answers a harmless question with a sharpness that seems to come from nowhere. The shadow does not vanish because you refuse to identify with it. It becomes autonomous. It enters through projection, disproportionate reactions, compulsive judgments, and sudden emotional reversals. You see in others the qualities you cannot tolerate in yourself. You condemn their arrogance because you have buried your authority. You resent their neediness because you have forbidden your own need. You call them irresponsible because some unlived part of you is starving for spontaneity. This does not mean every reaction is secretly your fault. It means the intensity of a reaction can reveal where your own psyche is involved. Jung mapped this with clinical precision. What remains unconscious does not remain inactive. It shapes your choices, while allowing you to believe that you are simply responding to reality. What you are calling emotional instability may be the return of qualities that were never given a legitimate place in your conscious life. Your readiness to transform is revealed by what no longer comforts you. At an earlier stage, familiar explanations were enough. You could tell yourself that things would improve once the project ended, once the relationship settled, once you became more disciplined, once you earned more, once you were finally understood. Those explanations organized your effort. They gave suffering a deadline. Then something changes. You reach the goal or move closer to it, and the expected relief does not arrive. The psyche has stopped accepting postponement as meaning. A person receives the confirmation they have been waiting for. The email contains the right words. The salary is higher. The title is better. They read it twice, then close the laptop and stare at the reflection in the darkened screen. That evening, friends raise glasses and speak about the future. They smile at the correct moments, while a quiet grief forms beneath the celebration. Jung saw that the first half of life often emphasizes adaptation, achievement, and the formation of a stable ego. You learn how to function, how to claim a place, how to meet the demands of the world. But the strategies that build a life are not always the strategies that deepen one. At some point, the question changes. The psyche no longer asks only, "How can you succeed?" It asks, "What is the success for?" It no longer asks, "How can you be accepted?" It asks, "What has acceptance required you to exclude?" This shift can make you feel ungrateful. You may have gained what you once wanted. You may be surrounded by evidence that you should be content. Yet the unconscious does not measure your life by comparison. It measures the distance between your conscious existence and the pattern of wholeness trying to emerge through you. What you are calling ingratitude may be the inability of your deeper nature to keep pretending that achievement and meaning are the same thing. The next sign is that solitude begins to feel necessary, even when isolation once frightened you. This is not always a rejection of people. It can be the psyche creating enough silence for a new center of gravity to form. Your social environment constantly reflects your known identity back to you. People call you by the name they have for you. They expect the reactions you have taught them to expect. Even loving relationships can unconsciously stabilize an old version of you, because every relationship develops around patterns of mutual recognition. When you begin to change, the familiar mirror becomes confusing. A woman leaves a gathering earlier than usual. In the elevator, she exhales as though she has been holding her breath for hours. She does not feel angry with anyone upstairs. She simply cannot continue explaining a life she no longer understands. At home, she turns off every light except the lamp beside the chair and sits without music. Jung withdrew for long periods when his own inner life entered crisis. He did not romanticize withdrawal as permanent escape. He used it as a vessel for confrontation with the unconscious. Real solitude is not the absence of relationship. It is the temporary removal of noise that prevents you from hearing what your life has been saying beneath your explanations. But solitude has a shadow too. You can use it to avoid intimacy, responsibility, or correction. The difference lies in what happens inside it. Avoidant isolation narrows you. Necessary withdrawal makes previously hidden material more available. It brings dreams, memories, grief, anger, images, and questions closer to the surface. It may not make you feel better, but it makes you harder to deceive. What you are calling withdrawal may be the psyche protecting a fragile inner transition from the pressure to become socially understandable too soon. Your dreams and recurring images often change before your decisions do. Jung treated dreams as spontaneous communications from the unconscious, not as coded fortune-telling. A dream compensates for the one-sidedness of your conscious attitude. It may show what you refuse to see, exaggerate what you minimize, or present an image of development that the ego cannot yet explain. When transformation approaches, dreams may become more vivid, repetitive, or emotionally charged, because the unconscious is intensifying its attempt to enter dialogue. A man dreams repeatedly of a house with a locked lower room. Each time, he stands at the top of the stairs and hears water moving below. During the day, he insists that his past is settled. One morning, while making coffee, he suddenly remembers the exact sound of his father closing a door during an argument decades earlier. He leaves the cup untouched and sits at the table until the memory finishes arriving. The image does not need to be interpreted quickly. Premature interpretation can become another form of control. The ego wants a clean meaning, so it can file the experience away. But symbols are alive because they contain more than one conscious explanation. The important question is not only what the image means, it is what the image does to you. Some symbols return because your conscious life has not yet made room for what they represent. They are evidence that the psyche thinks in images when concepts are too narrow. What you are calling strange or irrational may be the symbolic intelligence of your inner world reaching beyond the vocabulary your conscious identity has permitted. Transformation deepens when your old wounds stop asking only to be healed and begin asking to be understood. You may have spent years trying to remove pain, regulate it, forgive it, transcend it, or turn it into wisdom. Some of that work may have been necessary. But a wound is not only an injury, it can also become an organizing principle. You may build a personality around never being powerless again. You may become indispensable so no one can leave you. You may become unreadable so no one can use your vulnerability. You may become endlessly perceptive because safety once depended on noticing every change in another person's mood. A person hears a partner say, "I need some space tonight." Their face remains calm. They answer, "That is fine," and begin washing a glass that is already clean. The water runs too long. They check the phone 3 times in 5 minutes, then become angry with themselves for needing reassurance. Beneath the adult argument, an older terror is waiting at the door. Jung showed that complexes are emotionally charged patterns with a degree of autonomy. When a complex is activated, you do not merely remember the past, you temporarily experience the present through the emotional structure of the past. Your reactions can feel absolute, because the complex narrows consciousness. One sentence becomes abandonment. One mistake becomes humiliation. One delay becomes proof that you do not matter. The goal is not to destroy the complex. That usually strengthens the split. The task is to recognize when it has taken the center, to feel its emotional truth without granting it complete authority, and to discover the unlived need trapped inside it. Sometimes the wound guards a capacity. The child who became hypervigilant may carry extraordinary perception. The person who learned self-sufficiency may carry real strength. Yet the gift remains distorted until it is separated from the survival command that produced it. What you are calling oversensitivity may be an old protective intelligence that has never been allowed to update its understanding of the present. Your relationships become unstable when you stop carrying the projection that held them together. Jung understood projection as an unconscious transfer of inner content onto another person. You do not see only who they are, you see what they carry for you. They may carry your ideal strength, your forbidden freedom, your imagined salvation, your feared cruelty, or your unlived tenderness. This is why some relationships feel larger than life. The emotional charge does not come only from the other person. It comes from the part of your own psyche that has been placed upon them. A woman listens to someone she admires speak with confidence. She feels smaller with every sentence, though nothing insulting is said. Later, she repeats the person's opinions as if they were established truth. Months pass before she notices that the qualities she worships in them are qualities she punishes in herself whenever they begin to emerge. When projection withdraws, the relationship changes. You may feel disappointed, bored, angry, or suddenly clear. The person seems to have become ordinary, but what has actually changed is the location of psychic energy. A quality you once experienced only through them is trying to return to you. This can feel like loss because projection creates intensity. Reality is quieter. Some relationships cannot survive this withdrawal. They were organized around your smallness, your rescuing, your admiration, your dependence, or your willingness to remain misunderstood. Others become more real for the first time. You stop asking the other person to embody your missing soul. You begin meeting them as a separate human being. What you are calling disillusionment may be the painful return of your own authority from the people onto whom you placed it. There comes a point when insight itself becomes a defense. You can learn the language of the shadow and still avoid your shadow. You can describe your attachment pattern while repeating it. You can explain your childhood with precision and remain loyal to every conclusion you formed there. You can quote Jung, analyze dreams, recognize projections, and construct a psychologically sophisticated identity that protects you from the simplest truth. Something in your actual life must change. A man fills a notebook with observations after every conflict. He writes about the persona, the wounded child, and the activation of a complex. The pages are intelligent and sincere. Then the same friend insults him again, and he laughs to keep the evening comfortable. At home, he writes 3 more pages about why he could not speak. Jung warned against inflation, the condition in which the ego identifies with a powerful archetypal or spiritual idea. Psychological language can inflate the ego when understanding becomes a substitute for embodiment. You begin to feel advanced because you can name the mechanism. But the unconscious is not transformed by vocabulary alone. A truth becomes real when it alters the way you participate in your own life. This is where your readiness is tested, not in what you understand privately, but in what you can no longer betray publicly. The boundary spoken, the invitation declined, the grief admitted, the ambition released, the apology made without self-erasure, the help accepted, the role surrendered. Each act is small from the outside, but psychologically, it may end an entire internal regime. What you are calling a need for more clarity may be fear of paying the price that your existing clarity already demands. The deepest cost of transformation is not losing the life that was wrong for you. It is losing the innocence with which you participated in it. Once you see the bargain, you cannot fully return to unconscious obedience. You begin to recognize how often you traded truth for belonging, anger for approval, rest for worth, desire for safety, and uncertainty for an identity that others could easily understand. This recognition is painful because it removes the comfort of seeing yourself only as a victim of circumstance. Other people may have shaped the pattern. They may have rewarded your compliance, exploited your silence, or punished your difference. Those facts matter, but transformation asks where you now continue the arrangement from within. You may still blame the demanding parent while repeating their voice every morning. You may still resent the partner who minimized you while dismissing your own perceptions before they can be spoken. The outer authority becomes an inner authority. Then the prison no longer requires a guard. This is the shadow beneath the shadow. You are not only afraid of what others will do if you change. You are afraid of what you will have to admit about the years spent protecting the identity that kept you acceptable. You may have defended choices that injured you. You may have called endurance love. You may have called fear loyalty. You may have called numbness peace. To transform, you must grieve, not only what happened to you, but also the life energy you invested in making it seem necessary. Jung's idea of the self confronts the ego with a center larger than conscious preference. The self does not ask only what keeps your life stable. It presses toward wholeness, and wholeness includes conflict. The ego wants a transformation that preserves every relationship, every certainty, every reputation, and every comfort. The psyche rarely offers that agreement. Something real may have to end. Someone may misunderstand you. A role may remain empty after you leave it. A future you once promised may no longer be honest. The cost is specific. You may lose admiration when you stop performing strength. You may lose access when you stop accepting disrespect. You may lose certainty when you release an inherited belief. You may lose the fantasy of rescue when you withdraw projection from the person you expected to complete you. You may lose the identity of being the one who never needs anything. You may lose the moral superiority that came from never expressing anger. You may lose a version of goodness built upon disappearance. There is no psychologically honest way to guarantee that everyone will celebrate your integration. People often prefer the version of you that made their own patterns easier. Your silence may have protected a family myth. Your overfunctioning may have protected another person from responsibility. Your constant forgiveness may have protected a relationship from consequence. When you change, the system feels the missing labor. This is why you hesitate even when you know. You are not only choosing a truer life, you are choosing to stop paying for belonging with parts of yourself. The people who benefited from that payment may call the change cruelty, instability, selfishness, or betrayal. The old persona will repeat their accusation from inside you. You must decide whether the pain of becoming visible is greater than the pain of remaining divided. No one can make that decision for you. No insight can remove its cost. The inner world becomes ready before the outer life feels safe, and that difference is the threshold. You are allowed to stop demanding certainty before you honor what has already become clear. You are allowed to stop proving that your pain is serious enough to justify a change. You do not need a final betrayal or dramatic collapse before you acknowledge that a way of living has become psychologically untrue. The psyche often speaks first through subtler refusals, fatigue, dread, grief, or unexpected relief. These signals do not command you blindly, but they deserve more than automatic dismissal. You are allowed to stop forcing the old identity to feel alive. It served a purpose. It carried you through conditions in which adaptation mattered. You do not need to humiliate the person you were in order to become someone more whole. The persona was not a lie simply because it became too small. The defense was not foolish simply because it became restrictive. The wound was not weakness simply because it shaped your choices. Each formation began as an attempt to preserve life. Integration does not require you to become fearless. It asks you to become less willing to abandon yourself whenever fear appears. It does not require you to express every emotion immediately. It asks you to stop treating certain emotions as evidence that you are unworthy. It does not require a dramatic reinvention. It asks for a more honest relationship with the inner facts you already know. You may still go to the same job tomorrow. You may still live in the same home. You may still answer to the same name. Transformation is not proven by visible disruption. Sometimes the decisive change is that you no longer interpret your inner resistance as an enemy. You begin listening without obeying every impulse and without silencing every contradiction. You become capable of holding tension long enough for a third possibility to emerge, something Jung saw as the transcendent function of the psyche. That function does not give you an easy compromise. It creates a new attitude from the sustained encounter between opposing truths. You can love someone and refuse the role you played with them. You can value stability and admit that stability has become stagnation. You can feel gratitude for a life and know that you cannot remain inside its current form. You can be frightened and ready at the same time. This returns you to the accusation with which you began. You thought nothing was happening because the outer world had not yet changed. But the withdrawal of energy, the collapse of old comfort, the need for solitude, the return of anger, the vivid dream, the broken projection, and the unbearable repetition were not empty symptoms. They were the language of an inner world, reorganizing around a truth your conscious identity could no longer contain. You were not waiting for transformation to begin. You were waiting for permission to recognize that it already had. When your inner world is ready to transform, the message does not arrive as a promise that everything will become easier. It arrives as the quiet knowledge that you can no longer survive by remaining divided from yourself. The life ahead may not yet have a clear shape, but the life behind you has lost its claim to be called inevitable. If this resonates, subscribe to The Waking Shadow, where you explore Jung's psychology for the moments when your old identity no longer holds. Watch the video on your screen now to continue deeper into the path of individuation.